Killer and Pulu stood in the dimly lit maintenance room deep within the labyrinthine tunnels. The ghost girl had just whispered, "I need to find me," before vanishing into the shadows. The air was thick with unease, the weight of her words hanging heavily between them. Killer pulled out his cell phone and sent a coded message to the fam. "We need supplies," he said, his voice steady despite the strange encounter. Pulu nodded. "If we're going back down there, we need to be prepared." They navigated the twisting corridors back to the maintenance shaft, climbing the rungs until they emerged into the fading daylight. The city skyline was a jagged silhouette against the setting sun. Moments later, a dark, unmarked SUV approached, headlights off. It stopped briefly, the tinted window lowering just enough for 2 backpacks to be handed out before it sped away without a word. Opening the packs, they found essential gear: walkie-talkies, headlamps, flashlights, water, rope, and their preferred weapons, Killer's sleek combat knife and Pulu's custom-modified handgun. They exchanged a brief nod, understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. They shed their hazmat suits momentarily to strap on the backpacks and gear up, then donned the suits once more to blend into the subterranean environment. With resolve hardening their features, they descended back into the maintenance shaft and slipped into the air vent leading to the lab. The facility had returned to its cold, methodical rhythm. Scientists moved about with clinical detachment, engrossed in their experiments. Killer and Pulu moved like shadows, their footsteps silent as they retraced their path back to the train station. Standing before the sprawling digital map, Killer stared intently at the web of tunnels and nodes. Faintly, he could hear the ghost girl's voice echoing in his mind. "H. She's trying to tell us something," he murmured. Pulu glanced over. "What is it?" Killer's eyes locked onto a large H symbol on the map. "There," he pointed. "A helicopter pad?" Pulu raised an eyebrow. "Why would she lead us underground just to go back up?" Before Pulu could protest further, a train nearby sounded its horn, the doors beginning to close. Without hesitation, Killer sprinted toward it. "Wait up!" Pulu called, dashing after him. They slipped through the doors just as they sealed shut, the train jolting forward moments later. The car was empty, its sterile interior bathed in harsh fluorescent light. Pulu caught his breath, shooting Killer a frustrated look. "You sure about this?" Killer gazed ahead, his expression unreadable. "Trust me." The train hurtled through the darkness, the tunnel lights flashing by like specters. Minutes later, they arrived at a deserted platform. The sign above read, "Helipad access, authorized personnel only." Exiting the train, Killer led the way through a set of heavy doors and up a winding staircase. Their footsteps echoed ominously in the confined space. Reaching the top, they pushed open a final door and stepped out onto the rooftop of the city's towering news station. The helicopter sat before them, its rotors gleaming under the rooftop floodlights. The city sprawled out below, a glittering mosaic fading into the encroaching night. Pulu threw up his hands. "A news chopper? Seriously, we're wasting time." Before he could continue, the ghost girl appeared beside the helicopter, her form translucent against the backdrop of the city lights. "You must fly," she said softly. "I will guide you." Killer approached the helicopter without hesitation. "We don't have time to argue." "We don't know how to fly this thing," Pulu protested. Killer climbed into the pilot's seat and donned the headset. "Fam can walk me through it." Sighing heavily, Pulu searched the back of the helicopter, finding a couple of parachutes. "Just in case," he muttered, strapping one on before settling into the seat beside Killer. Killer's phone buzzed, a message from the fam containing a quick start guide to the helicopter's controls. His fingers moved swiftly over the switches and levers, the engine roaring to life. The rotors began to spin, the thumping sound filling the air. "Killer to Pulu," his voice crackled over the headset. "You good, fam?" Pulu adjusted his helmet, trying to steady his nerves. "I'll feel better once we're back on solid ground." With a tentative pull on the collective lever, the helicopter lifted off the rooftop. It wobbled precariously, but Killer adjusted the cyclic stick, stabilizing their ascent. Below, the city lights became a shimmering sea as they climbed higher into the night sky. The onboard navigation system flickered on, a single route highlighted, a path cutting through the mountains north of the city. Killer felt a cold presence beside him. Glancing sideways, he saw the ghost girl reflected faintly in the cockpit window. her finger pointing along the glowing route. "That's our path," he said. They flew in tense silence, the mountains rising to meet them as they left the city behind. The terrain below grew rugged, shadows pooling in the valleys like ink. Clouds gathered, obscuring the stars and casting the world into deeper darkness. As they approached the designated location, an alarm blared, a shrill warning cutting through the steady thrum of the rotors. "What's happening?" Pulu shouted over the noise. "Engine failure," Killer replied, gripping the controls tightly. The helicopter began to descend rapidly, the ground rushing up to meet them. "Brace yourself!" The helicopter crashed onto the hillside, skidding violently before coming to a jarring halt against a cluster of trees. The rotors splintered with a deafening crack, debris scattering. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of steam and the distant call of nocturnal creatures. Pulu groaned, unbuckling his harness. "Well, that was a $500,000 landing," he muttered, wincing as he moved. "You almost got us killed." Killer didn't respond. He stumbled out of the wreckage, eyes fixed ahead. There, illuminated by the pale glow of the moon breaking through the clouds, was a chillingly familiar sight. "The haunted holler," he whispered. Stretching out before them was the eerie landscape from the hayride. The twisted trees, the fog rolling over the uneven ground, the silhouettes of decrepit structures looming in the darkness. There was no sound, no rustling leaves, no nocturnal creatures, just an oppressive silence. "It's too quiet," Pulu observed, his voice barely above a whisper. Killer checked his watch instinctively. The hands were frozen, unmoving. Something's not right. As they stood, the darkness around them began to shift. The inky blackness faded into the soft hues of dawn. The sun peeked over the horizon, like casting long shadows through the twisted trees of the haunted holler. "Wait, wasn't it just night?" Pulu asked, bewildered. Killer's vision blurred, and for a moment he felt weightless, as if suspended in a void where time and space lost all meaning. Memories flickered through his mind, fragments of past missions, faces of allies and enemies alike, all merging into a disorienting mosaic. "It feels like we're being pulled back," Killer managed to say, his voice distant in his own ears. The sensation intensified, a spiraling descent through layers of reality. Images overlapped, the lab, the tunnels, the haunted holler, all blending into a chaotic tapestry. Pulu looked around in disbelief. "How did we get here? We were just... How is this possible?" Killer's hand instinctively moved to his weapon. "It's like we've traveled back in time, or back to where it all began." A chilling realization settled over them. They weren't just retracing their steps. They were caught in a loop, a distortion of reality where the past and present intertwined. Killer checked his watch instinctively. The second hand ticked, then stopped at precisely 3 minutes past the hour. The forest around them was unnervingly silent, the stillness pressing in like a heavy blanket. Even the faint rustling of leaves had ceased, leaving only the sound of their breathing. 3 minutes, Killer whispered, his voice cutting through the silence. "It's like time just stopped." Pulu shifted uneasily, glancing around. "I don't like this." Then, without warning, the scene shifted. The inky blackness of night dissolved into soft morning light. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the haunted holler. Killer glanced at his watch again, 3 hours later. "What the hell?" Pulu muttered, wide-eyed. The faint sounds of voices filtered through the trees. They turned to see neighbors emerging from their homes, calling out names and scanning the tree line. "Has anyone seen her?" A woman shouted anxiously. "Not yet," another replied. "We need to spread out." The air was thick with worry, but before Killer or Pulu could process what was happening, the world shimmered again. The morning light shifted into the harsh glare of the midday sun. Killer instinctively checked his watch. It now read 3 days later. "This can't be real," Pulu said, his voice tight with disbelief. The holler was alive with activity. Search teams with dogs combed the woods methodically. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades chopping through the tense atmosphere. On the ground, the community buzzed with chaos. Near a weathered porch, a couple argued heatedly. Killer and Pulu stood frozen, witnesses to a scene they couldn't alter or explain. Then, as suddenly as before, the scene shifted again. Leaves on the trees faded into shades of amber and crimson. Autumn had arrived. Killer's watch now read 3 months later. The holler had grown quiet. The bustling search parties were gone, replaced by a hollow stillness. Only women moved through the area, their faces lined with sorrow and resignation. Occasionally they whispered to one another, casting wary glances toward the few remaining men, innocent locals who lingered in the ruins of their community. "They say the holler is cursed," an elderly woman murmured to her companion, "that the menfolk brought this upon us." Pulu shook his head. "What the hell is happening here, Killer?" But before Killer could answer, the world twisted one final time. The vivid autumn colors dissolved into darkness, and the moonlit forest reappeared. The scent of damp earth filled the air as they found themselves back at the helicopter wreckage. Killer's watch flickered, its hands now reading a date 3 years later. "What is this?" Pulu whispered, his voice thick with unease. "Are we stuck in a time loop?" Before Killer could respond, a flash of movement caught their attention. There, darting through the trees along the old hayride trail, was the ghost girl. Her white sheet fluttered behind her like a specter in the wind. "There she is!" Pulu exclaimed. Without hesitation, they took off after her. The forest seemed to shift around them, twisting the familiar path into an unrecognizable maze. Branches clawed at their hazmat suits, and the ground beneath their feet felt unstable, like it might give way at any moment. The girl led them back to the hollow tree, the same one they had encountered before. She slipped inside the narrow opening without a sound. Pulu skidded to a halt. "I told you so. Full circle. We're going in circles." Killer ignored him, his expression hardening. "We can't stop now." He squeezed through the opening, feeling the rough bark scrape against his suit. Pulu sighed heavily and followed. The air inside was thick with the scent of damp wood and decay. They descended into the hollow chamber, the roots around them twisting like skeletal fingers. At the bottom, they found a small dirt room, eerily quiet. The girl was nowhere to be seen. "Where did she go?" Pulu asked, scanning the space. Killer pointed to a narrow hole in the floor, partially hidden by hanging roots. "Through there." They crawled through the opening and dropped into another chamber, this one lined with cold, cracked concrete. The sterile scent of the tunnels replaced the earthy aroma of the tree. Before them was a long staircase descending into near-total darkness. The faint hum of machinery echoed from below, a haunting reminder of what they had already witnessed. "This feels worse than before," Pulu muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. "Keep your head on a swivel," Killer said, leading the way. At the bottom, they pushed open an old wooden door to reveal a forgotten lobby. Dust hung heavy in the air, illuminated by the weak flicker of an ancient chandelier. An old reception desk stood against the far wall, its surface covered in cobwebs. "What is this place?" Pulu asked, his voice hushed. Killer approached the desk, brushing aside the grime to reveal a tarnished nameplate, Hollow Creek Crematorium. "A crematorium?" Pulu read, unease creeping into his voice. "Why would there be one here?" Before Killer could answer, the distant hum grew louder, and a metal gate on the far side of the room creaked open. Beyond it lay the familiar glow of the tunnels. "We're back," Killer said grimly, realizing the web of tunnels that stretched for miles and miles from the holler to the city. "Back in the tunnels?" Pulu added, shaking his head. "What the—"
We the best, no contest. My clique is the best. We the best. There ain't no one like cause of you dumb or you crazy. There's no way, G. Me and my clique, we handling biz while you and your clique just act fugazi. You couldn't persuade me to give a damn and this don't faze me. I got my Xbox, she can't play me. Money in a text box, I get paid. We the best. We the best, no contest. My clique is the best. We the best. We the best, no contest. My clique is the best. We the best. We the best. There ain't no rest. For the wicked I'm bad and I'm blessed. Put it to the test. For the rest there ain't no contest. So what's next? Got me leveling up, I'm obsessed. I bring the fire like I'm possessed. My personnel and my clique is the best. There ain't no contest. There ain't no one like cause of you dumb or you crazy. There's no way, G. Me and my clique, we handling biz while you and your clique just act fugazi. You couldn't persuade me to give a damn and this don't faze me. I got my Xbox, she can't play me. Money in a text box, I get paid. We the best. We the best. We the best. No contest. My clique is the best.